now I'm doing the stripes. But why I would recommend using a ballpoint pen on the letters is that it takes a lot of practice to get a brush tip into those little tiny areas, and as it does, that is one of the last steps of your drawing, is filling in that little area, and you've committed a lot of time to your drawing. So really going over it twice, like as I show on this card where the 8 was like this, I would just recommend thickening it like this with a ballpoint pen, just kind of making it thicker like that, because that way you don't lose your whole drawing in 5 seconds, because that can be a very frustrating moment. And here I will put the anti-glare panel on here, and basically we might as well move on to the Florida East Coast logo. Here's a little bit of light blue. And then this is actually an ink pen to do the sun. And here's green for the palm trees. And a lot of times on logos like this, like I might put, which I almost, one way or the other, it's just very, very delicately, I'll put a little tiny bit of black around the outside, just to define it from the engine, because there's a little bit of black trim. But it says Florida East Coast Railway just in a little hint of lettering that you can barely read. You can't even really read it. And I would just leave it in pencil. I wouldn't even try to go over it with a black pen. I would just leave it in pencil, because it is so delicate that trying to go over it one more time, you'll lose it. No, I didn't do the back steps. And again, as I said, this is where a lot of measuring really pays off, because these walkways, steps, really have a lot of precision. And with the ballpoint pen, the Florida East Coast engine, as you will see, has black handrails, except for the yellow tips. The yellow tips, as we did, are the safety part. But we might as well do the black, since we were just sort of doing black in places. It doesn't hurt to do black, because part of why I recommend doing these finer parts of black, I started working on the underframe a little bit, but you're better off doing some of this finer work, like the lettering and these handrails. You're better off doing it right now before you do the actual paint on the underframe, because especially depending on what kind of pens you use, but just about all pens, do you see how my hand drags across where this underframe would be? Most pens, that area is going to have wet ink on it. And where it has wet ink, your hand's going to pick up, and all throughout there, you're going to get wet ink on your hand. And again, as we talk about, all this time committed to this drawing, and as you can see how close it is to getting done, you could lose the whole drawing just because you started to smear the black underframe or even the red. So that's why it's good to get some of the finer detail work done. Now, just like we painted the orange and the red, Now we'll be painting the black for the underframe. And as I paint the steps are a very delicate area. Not as delicate as, say, going around the logos and stuff, but they're delicate in the sense that you want to keep a nice tight edge so that the steps look straight and smooth. And then again on this, we do what we've been doing up above, is that we paint all of the straight edges. See, I'm painting along this row. See, every surface that's along the bottom of the engine, I'm painting straight. What this does is that this kind of gives you the bottom part of the engine is kind of blocked off. And once it is, you then, as we did on the other engines, you flip the engine, which I'll do in a second. You flip the engine, and in flipping the engine, and don't you already kind of see how the underframe is starting to turn black? You flip the engine, and in flipping the engine, you fill in. There's a few places along our guidelines that you can kind of see through the underframe. That's part of why underframes, as I've said, have always been a little bit challenging. But there's the front truck. And then the tank is kind of the easiest part of the underframe, but you still have to stay straight along. Again, the bottom, and you basically want to fill in all the areas and keep that straight line. And then again, as I always have been saying, put 2 coats on it, because 2 coats gives it that sheen of a brand new engine. Especially these Florida East Coast engines. If you're drawing these, you want to give them that nice shiny look. And as I was doing before, you flip it over. And I bet as you're looking at this, and if you're drawing along at home, you're like, whoa, we're pretty much done here, aren't we? And it's like, yeah, basically. And you're kind of starting to say, whoa. Even if it takes lots and lots of practice. I've been doing this for years and years, but people email me and write to me all the time. How do I get better? How do I practice? And this is some of the basic ways of doing it. And now we do the anti-glare panel. Even I, sometimes, when you get excited when it's almost done, but you should always put a second coat on. And now, basically, we start to, this is brown, sepia color, and we do this for the coupler. And here's, you put the traction motor and the wheel there, and just the spacer axle there for an ES44C4, and then another traction motor and axle there, and traction motor and an axle there, and a spacer axle there, and traction motor and an axle there, and the front coupler. And the one thing, it's just a practice you doesn't hurt to get into, is just put your name under it. Because you should be proud of everything you draw. And there's the Florida East Coast ES44C4 that we practice